Hey everyone, welcome to the Flying with Brian channel. It's spring, the sun is out, we're in sunny Southern California here at my house, and I'm getting ready to go to the hangar to fly my plane. My Lancer Evolution, with its Pratt & Whitney engine, is classified as experimental. It was built in a garage, it was built by enthusiasts. I certainly didn't build it. You would not want to fly in a plane that I personally built, but these guys did a great job. And if you haven't already, please like, share, and subscribe. This channel would be so great to have you follow me on all the journeys, and we have some incredible journeys coming up. I can't wait to share with you. But first, we got to go to the hangar, so come with me. And welcome to Van Nuys Airport, where I keep November 424 Sierra Mike, my Lancer Evolution, and just as importantly, Bleep Bloop, my best tugs robot that tows 424 Sierra Mike around the tarmac here. We brought you here today to talk to you a little bit about the difference between having an experimental airplane and a certified airplane. As you can see in the door, big words, experimental, are there. And in fact, they're mandated by the FAA that they're of a certain size and certain visibility. I don't know what those exactly are. You can look in the regulations. And also, one thing you should absolutely remember is I'm just a basic pilot with an instrument rating who owns an experimental plane. I don't know necessarily all the rules and regulations by heart. So I encourage you, if you're watching this video, if you think I've said something wrong, kindly put them in the comments and educate me, and hopefully I can educate you here as well. Prior to this airplane, I owned a Cirrus, which is a certified plane, and now I'm in an experimental plane. So in my world, I can sort of tell you how the difference has impacted me personally. Okay, so as I said just a minute ago, my prior plane was a Cirrus. It was an incredible plane. Generation 5, had a parachute, turbo, was amazing. Also know the difference in terminology anyway is an annual inspection on an experimental plane is called a conditional inspection versus an annual inspection. I don't know really what the difference is. They kind of do the same thing. So when this plane is up in maintenance every year, they do virtually the same thing they do on a certified plane. They take out the seats, they take out the floorboards, they take out the headliners, and they look at everything. But there's a certain amount of flexibility you get when you have an experimental plane. Now, when you have a certified plane, you can't just add structures or modifications to the interior of your plane very easily, unless you have an STC that allows you to do so. But in my experimental plane, I was able to add something that was very critical to the performance of my plane and really helped me out, and I didn't have to ask the FAA if it was okay. And that's these guards around my emergency oxygen switch. When my passengers would come into my plane, they'd accidentally hit that toggle switch because there were no guards around it. But in my last conditional inspection, I had these guards added around my switch, so that way you can't accidentally turn on my emergency oxygen. Since my conditional inspection 4 months ago, 5 months ago, I haven't had to replace my oxygen, which is great. It was worth the money. That modification, like $30. When I took this plane into conditional inspection last year, was I really wanted an AOA. This plane was built without any stall horn. The only way you knew you were gonna stall is if it started falling out of the sky. No, seriously, it would start buffeting and you really pay attention to speeds, but I really had no device on this plane. No horn, nothing. And coming from the Cessna world and the Cirrus world, I was used to having some kind of information that would tell me my plane was getting close to a stall. So because this was an experimental, I was able to get a new pitot tube, which had a whole bunch of AOA functionality on it. And then I installed an AOA system. And this AOA system, as you know, or some of you know, it dynamically generates the speed based on the angle of attack of your wing. I do realize that some airplanes either come with an AOA or have an STC to add their own. But for this experimental, it was super easy and super cheap. Like one of the first things I did when I bought this plane is I wanted to have a USB-C charger. So I went online, like Sporties or whatever, and it was so expensive. USB-C charger just for the charger itself was like $500. So I asked my maintenance guy if he could install something, and he said, we don't need to get a certified version. And so I have a USB-C, USB-A charger charger, and with labor was out the door for like 200 bucks. Now, to be perfectly honest, I don't know if you own a certified plane, if you can just add a cup holder at will. But for me, because I have my experimental plane, I went to my friend Jace, this is his Instagram, and what he did was he used his iPhone, created a LiDAR 3D image of this entire cabin area right here, and then printed color coordinated cup holders that not only hold a Starbucks cup, hold a can, hold a bottle, nothing alcoholic, and it all fits right here. And it's easy for me as the pilot to reach back here and grab a cup and keep it safe. I don't know what self-respecting pilot would have an airplane without a cup holder. I was certainly one of them for 2 years, but now I've joined the masses and have cup holders. And while this plane does not have a parachute like my Cirrus did, actually some Evolutions are built with a parachute, but I don't have one, which gives me so much more room for luggage. One of the things I didn't know about owning an experimental plane when I first got into the experimental world, though, was some of the difficulties that you run into and encounter when you're actually trying to fly out of the country. But honestly, I like to fly to Mexico, and they've made it very difficult in Mexico. I actually had to go to the federal government of Mexico and get them to certify my airplane to be safe to fly into the airspace. Spend hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dollars, maybe almost $1,000 to get this single piece of paper that's only good for 3 months. Without this piece of paper, I could not fly my plane, my Evolution, into Mexico, but I haven't found this out firsthand. Not even possible to fly to Japan if you ever wanted to go to Japan. And I know that sounds like pie in the sky stuff when you talk about piloting in the United States, but I think I forgot to mention, the reason I bought this plane, the reason I bought a turboprop plane, is because I wanted to fly it around the world. And I still plan to, but unfortunately I need 2 stops in Russia, and landing in Russia is not an option right now. And like I said, there are definitely some difficulties owning an experimental plane, like being able to fly to other countries. And when you have a turboprop, flying to other countries is very much a reality, but there are ways to mitigate that. I personally was lucky enough to begin working with World Fuel. And World Fuel has done a lot of wonderful things to help me get my plane into Mexico and Canada. They even trip planned me a flight all the way to Paris, which meant I would have flown to Iceland, Greenland, Scotland, and Canada. And so because it is difficult when you own a non-certified and experimental plane, your airworthiness certificate looks different. Each country has to give you approval to fly into their airspace. Having somebody like World Fuel to help you out really helps smooth out and mitigate all of those difficulties you would otherwise encounter when you have an experimental airplane. Now, many Evolutions actually do have some form of ice protection. They have boots, which really slow the plane down, or some are working on this new system where they take basically toaster oven coils and wrap them around the gas tank, which sort of heats the wing and melts the ice. What could go wrong? I certainly am not going to put that system on my plane, but currently I don't have any ice protection at all except for a heated propeller, a heated windshield, and a heated pitot tube. But the one thing you should know about all experimental planes is that they are never ever allowed to fly into known icing conditions. If you have ice protection on an experimental plane, it is there only to save you from unforecasted, unpredicted situations where you find yourself in icing. And with all of this talk about experimental airplanes, one of the most important sort of certified things about this plane is the Pratt & Whitney PT6A 135A 750 shaft horsepower engine right here. This is the engine that pulls this airplane through the air at 285 knots. And because it is such a reliable Pratt & Whitney engine, you have to make sure it's well taken care of. And this airplane complies with all of the Pratt & Whitney certified requirements to make sure that it's up to date, well maintained, and always taken care of. Now, when I have a passenger flying in my plane, I'm actually required by the FAA to give them this important information about my experimental aircraft, like I did in my last video. And one thing I need to tell you is this is an amateur-built aircraft and does not comply with the federal regulations for standard aircraft, which means that most likely we'll be okay. Do you feel safe, Jake?
Extremely.
There you have it. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that you have learned a little bit about the differences between having an experimental aircraft and a certified aircraft. I mean, I know it was surprising to me, all the differences. I feel so honored and blessed to own the absolute best Evolution in the fleet. And really, it's just exciting for me to share it with you. So whether it's here online or at some airport somewhere along the way, I hope I get to meet you. And in the meantime, I'll see you in the sky.